I started my shift at 10 p.m. from the ranger station and was tasked with doing the regular night watch to make sure the park and everyone in it was safe. I carried a flashlight, radio, map, and first aid kit. My patrol plan was to check the important park places like the campsites, picnic spots, and a few trails. First, I went to the campgrounds to make sure all the fires were out and nothing sketchy was going on. Once that was taken care of, I went to the picnic areas to check the trash cans were shut tight so animals couldn't get in. After that, I walked the main trails, sometimes using my flashlight to look for any animals in trouble or people who might have gotten lost. I also tried to stay alert for any weird noises that could mean there was a problem. While I was on my usual patrol, I thought I'd go through the Deep Hollow Woods, a part of the park that not many people visit because of its thick greenery and old trees. I also had to cross the Old Creek Bridge, which is this wood bridge over a tiny stream and is hidden by the woods around it. Lots of folks say it's a gorgeous spot, but some folks also say it freaks them out, especially at night. So when I was heading towards the Deep Hollow Woods, I reminded myself to be alert and keep an eye on everything around me. I began feeling something off when the place went dead quiet and chilly just before I bumped into that thing. When I was getting close to the entrance of the Deep Hollow Woods, I noticed things weren't normal. It turned colder even though it was summer, and I could see my own breath. The trees felt closer and the shadows seemed way darker than usual. Usually the forest is full of cricket noises, moving leaves, and sometimes you hear an owl, but it was weirdly quiet. Also, my radio, which usually works fine, started having a lot of static. Even when I tried messing with the frequency, it didn't get better. My flashlight was also acting up, flickering a lot. That's when I spotted a bad smell. It was just a bit at first, but it got stronger as I got closer to the Old Creek Bridge. It smelled like something rotting and a little like blood, too. I thought maybe there was a good reason for it, like maybe there was some dead animal up ahead. The quiet, the cold, the radio noise, the smell, and the fog just didn't sit right with me. I was headed toward the Old Creek Bridge when my flashlight blinked and then lit up someone near the forest's edge. I was kind of freaked when I saw it. This thing was about 9 feet tall, really dwarfing me. It had really long, skinny legs, kind of like an elk. The creature was super skinny, with its skin falling off in some places, and you could see its bones. Even in the low light, you could see its decaying flesh. And that smell I noticed before, it was way worse now and clearly coming from this creature. The scariest part, though, was its head. There was this thing with a deer skull as its head, right? And it had antlers that twisted in weird ways. The skull was stark white, almost like it was glowing under the moon. Instead of eyes, there were just these two big dark holes. The craziness doesn't end there, though. When I shone my torch on it, these holes lit up yellow and then turned this creepy burning red. I swear they seemed to react to the light. The air around the animal kind of shook, like there was an unseen barrier around it. That weird fog I saw before seemed to wrap around its legs. I was trying hard to understand what was going on. The animal didn't make a noise, but it felt really overwhelming, like it was difficult to breathe. The stink was so bad it made my eyes tear up and my stomach upset. When I was standing there, this thing slowly looked at me. I felt creepy, like it could see right through me. It felt as if it wasn't just seeing me, but like it was reading my mind or something. I finally could move again. I slowly started stepping back, keeping my eyes on that thing. When I got to the end of the bridge, suddenly that thing just spun around and disappeared into the trees. My heart was going nuts, and I quickly headed back towards the ranger station. As soon as I was far enough away from where I saw that beast, my park ranger senses kicked in. I had to report this incident and make sure everyone else in the park was safe. I tried to contact the ranger station using my radio. The static noise had reduced a bit, but I couldn't communicate clearly. I told them there was a problem at the Old Creek Bridge that needed quick help. As I was waiting for more people to come, I parked my car at the start of the Deep Hollow Woods to stop anyone from getting to the bridge. I turned on the emergency lights to give a heads up to anyone coming close. Then I grabbed my notepad and started to write down everything I noticed, like what time it was, where I was, and everything about the creature. I also jotted down the differences in the surroundings I noticed before bumping into it. I clicked a few photos of the area around the Old Creek Bridge with my camera. Even though the thing was gone, I still wanted to have a record of the place, in case it left any clues or stuff like that. When the rest of the squad arrived, I filled them in on what happened and pointed out where I spotted that thing. We first looked around the area, keeping away from the woods and using strong flashlights. With help from other team members, I checked out the closest campsites to make sure any campers were moved to a safer spot in the park. We told them there could be some danger, but didn't say much more. After the area was safe and campers were moved, I went back to the ranger station. I put together a report with all my findings and photos and showed it to my boss, stressing how important and serious it was because of what I had come across. Since the whole experience was really rough for me, my boss set up a meeting with a therapist to talk about everything that happened. The therapist really paid attention as I explained what occurred that night. I talked about how creepy the creature looked, its unsettling eyes, and just how scary the whole atmosphere was. The counselor tried to make me feel better. Weeks passed and we still had no clear idea of what had happened. The photos I took only showed blurry figures and weird shadows, raising more questions instead of providing answers. What happened was still a mystery, a scary event that'll always be remembered as part of the park's past. Months went by, and what happened at the Old Creek Bridge slowly became an old tale amongst park stories. But it really changed me. I started to value nature's beauty more. Years later, even close to retiring, I still look back at that time at the Old Creek Bridge as a turning point in my job. I shared what I know and my experiences with the new rangers, telling them to always be alert and to respect the wilderness while also being careful. I'm hoping my story also helps your listeners to stay safe. I used to be a sheriff in a small New Hampshire town. One night around 6:30 p.m., I got a call about some kids messing around at the local middle school, bothering some students who were staying late for a play rehearsal. It seemed a bit silly, but sometimes just showing up in the police car is enough to calm rowdy kids down. When I got to the school, though, I didn't see any kids outside. I entered the building and saw some students and 3 teachers in the lunchroom. They told me that there were about 6 or 7 kids, roughly aged 10 to 14, outside. They were dressed pretty old-fashioned and kept knocking on the windows to get inside. But whenever a teacher went out to speak to them, they'd all run off. The students were shifted to the cafeteria because it had no windows. The teachers didn't know any of the kids outside. Until I found the kids, I couldn't really do anything. I didn't spot any of them when I drove in, but they might be in the small forest behind the school, beyond the softball field. If I were a naughty kid, that's where I'd hide. I asked the students if they knew any of the kids, but I knew they wouldn't snitch on their friends even if they did. Only one girl answered. She was probably around 11, I guess. She told me she thought she saw a kid outside the window, but it wasn't a real kid. She couldn't really explain what she meant, but it freaked her out. It asked to come inside, but she felt like she shouldn't let it in. She told me it had black eyes, not brown or gray, completely black. At first I thought she was joking, but she was serious. You could tell she was really scared. I thought I'd take a stroll around the school. I let the teachers and students know to ring me immediately if they spotted those kids again and to keep them out of the building. Regardless, I'm not sure why I said it, but something about her story got to me. I checked around the school but found no traces. So I thought I'd check the forest, maybe find some clue about them there. The sun was going down, but it wasn't dark enough for a flashlight yet. If I wanted to check the woods, now was the time. I didn't spot anything unusual, but something didn't feel right. I can't explain it, but as soon as I walked into the woods, I could tell. I got a call barely half a minute later from a teacher. She told me the kids had returned and were making a racket at the library window. I rushed back to the school, trying to get there quick enough to catch them. I got to the library, but there was nobody there. I drove my car around the whole school, but still no kids. I went back inside to ask the teachers what they saw. They told me the same story. Kids were wearing plain clothes and knocking on the doors and windows, wanting to get in. But the moment we answered the phone, they were gone. We looked at the school's footage and didn't see anything. The cameras should have recorded something, but I didn't see anything strange. I went back to the cafeteria where everyone else was. I told the teachers I couldn't find the kids and suggested they end early and send everyone home today. We can deal with it if it happens again. Then the young girl, who's around 11, stopped me and asked, "What if someone lets them in?" I told her that I wasn't sure. She then said, "I noticed loud bangs on the library doors. Then the door opened and the noise ceased. Does that mean they're inside now? Someone let them in, right?" There was total silence until a teacher spoke up. She saw the kids outside the library. "You know, there's a door from the library that goes out to the courtyard." She was about to shout at the kids when they bolted at her sight. They didn't stop, so she ended up leaving the library. On her way out, she caught the sound of the door opening and closing, but there was no one when she looked back. Don't ask me why, but I just knew we were in a tight spot. I quickly ushered everyone into a nearby classroom and closed the door. I told the kids to phone their parents for an early pickup, or else I'd drive them home in my police car. I asked for more cops to help take these kids home. We waited, felt like an hour, but it was probably only around 10 minutes. I thought I might have freaked out a bit, but then I heard some soft footsteps in the hallway like a kid's. They stopped at the door and then a knock. "Can you let me in, please? I can't find my way," the voice said. It sounded like a kid's voice, but I knew it wasn't. The same line was said 3 times. I said, "You can't be here, you can't come in." I shouted it at the door 3 times. After a pause, I heard footsteps walking away. I checked the door to see if I can spot the kid, but saw nothing. We managed to safely lead all the students and teachers to their cars. I can't tell what those things were, but they definitely weren't human. The only positive thing about them seems to be that they need an invitation to enter. I'd say don't invite them over. Nothing good will come out of it. When I was 15, we had to move from our place in the Chicago suburbs to this small town in northern Minnesota. Dad had lost his job when the factory closed, and one of his cousins offered him a job up there. I wasn't happy to switch schools halfway through high school, and the bitter cold of the north really bummed me out. But my parents kept saying how beautiful it was, with all these lakes and outdoor activities. We shifted to our new place in June, right after school was over. The summer was surprisingly not bad. It was really hot, though. My dad's cousin was pretty cool. He let us use his boat and we hung out on the lake a lot. My dad took us fishing a couple times and we started playing hockey to blend in. When the fall came, school began. The school was super tiny compared to the one I attended in Chicago. But hey, I made friends in no time and figured I could put up with it for the next 2 years before going back to Chicago for college. And then winter came. Chicago winters are bad, but this is even worse. It's often way below freezing. We're talking single or even negative degrees. We were so near the lake that the wind made it feel 20 degrees colder. Most of the time, I only left my room for school or hockey practice. By February, I was getting cabin fever. When spring rolled around and it got a bit warmer, my brother and I were so desperate we asked our parents to take us out somewhere. Didn't matter where. So they suggested we go to State Forest for the weekend. It's just an hour away. Our folks got us all kayaks for Christmas, kinda to make up for us moving. The park's full of lakes and rivers, so we planned to kayak, hike, and even camp overnight. We had no issues getting there on Saturday morning. We found a spot to camp, put everything together, and then carried our kayaks to where we could launch them. We spent hours kayaking on the lake, snapping photos of animals, fishing, and just chilling. After we got back to our camp, we strolled around for a bit, then got a campfire going and ate dinner. Even though it was unusually hot during the day, we knew it was going to get pretty cold at night. So we came prepared, bringing with us a bunch of extra blankets. We were all knocked out after kayaking. I woke up in the middle of the night needing the toilet. I tried to ignore it because I didn't want to leave my sleeping bag, but eventually I had to. I quietly got out, making sure I wouldn't wake my brother, and just put on my shoes and coat. The tents were just out in the open, but there were some trees about 20 yards away, so I went there. No way I was trekking to the campsite bathrooms. I didn't need a flashlight. The moon was bright enough to light my path, and I wasn't going very far. I just went a bit into the trees and did my thing. I was almost done when I heard something. It was definitely an animal noise. I wasn't freaked out or anything, just interested. I'm still getting used to seeing animals all over the place, and I've been keeping track of all the things I've run into recently. I was wishing it'd be something awesome, like an elk or moose. Could have been a wolf, though that'd probably freak me out. I kept quiet, looking out for what it could be. I heard some noises, but I still couldn't see anything. I was really cold, so I thought I'd go back to the tent. Suddenly I saw something moving in the trees. It was super tall, so it had to be a moose or an elk. I was thinking of quietly waking up my family because they wouldn't believe this. I was worried it would leave before we could return to see it, so I stayed put and kept looking. After a while, I saw something move again and heard it coming towards me. It emerged from a bunch of dense pine trees. At first, I didn't know what I was looking at. I saw the face and thought it was a wolf, but its head was too high up. Plus, the face just didn't look right. Then I saw the rest of it. Have you ever seen something walking on two legs that isn't human? This thing I saw was massive, like 8 or 9 feet tall. Its arms were unnaturally long and it had a bit of a hunchback. It freaked me out, man. This thing had strong legs and it had claws on all 4 of its feet. Its entire body was covered in really dark brown, almost black-colored fur. It was looking right at me, and its amber eyes were way too smart-looking. It made this strange sound, kind of like a mix between panting and grunting, and I saw it had super sharp teeth. That made me bolt. I was yelling all the way back to our tents and went straight to my parents. But by the time they woke up, that scary thing had disappeared, and guess what? They didn't believe me. They kept saying I must be dreaming or the shadows in the forest messed with my head. I was sure about what I saw. When I got home, I looked it up online. After a while, I found exactly what I saw. Some images weren't the same, but some looked just like what I saw that night. I found some folks online who saw the same thing I did. They all referred to it as a dog man. My family didn't believe me, though, but I swore I'd never return to that park again. So the thing I want to tell you is about this ridiculously lucky thing that happened to me. Honestly, I had no business being where I was when it happened. Ever since then, I've been keeping out of sight. You'll get what I mean when I tell you. I'm really going out on a limb sharing this, so don't be shocked if you hear from me soon after you share it. So get this. Like 5 years ago, I was stuck working for this big company in some super random place. I won't say exactly where, because if the people who know me catch on, they'll know I'm the guy they gotta watch out for. Back when I was in my early 20s, I used to work as a prison officer. I had a low-ranking but high-risk job where I could be hurt by the prisoners any day. It was tough figuring out who to trust, since honestly you couldn't really trust any of them. After 2 years there, my then-girlfriend started worrying about my health. I wasn't sleeping well, was stressed all the time, and kept falling sick because I was just worn out. I know it must have been tough for you, having a partner around dangerous folks constantly. So I decided to search for a new job. 6 months later, I luckily got an interview with a security company not too far from where we live, just about a 45-minute drive in the city. So this place I'm talking about is in the US, and it's usually really hot and dry. Not much green stuff around, but lots of red rocks. It's pretty cool if you're into that sort of thing. I had to go through this tough interview process for the job, which is expected for a security role. I got to skip a few steps since I previously worked at the Department of Corrections. They already had my fingerprints but had to conduct a thorough background check. I had to ensure all my vaccinations were up to date and be trained to deal with intense situations. However, from the job interview, it seems like the job would be pretty relaxed. Most of the job was just sitting at a desk and checking people in. The first sign that something was off was the large paycheck, though of course I wasn't complaining. I took some time off before my first day, then drove to what turned out to be a really unforgettable place. The building had 15 floors and stood alone in a little fenced-in area. It wasn't actually part of any town. There were concrete walls around the place, and you needed to swipe your badge to get through the gate. This was strange, but not unheard of. Many tech companies have similar security. There were also several other facilities around the site, like some cafeterias, a gym for the staff, an admin building, and a small clinic. It was a decent place. The first few months were uneventful, and it turned out to be mostly a desk job, as I thought. I wasn't really sure what the workers were doing, but they mostly wore suits or smart casual clothes. They usually worked from 7 in the morning till 6:30 in the evening. I usually worked the day shift for the security job, but one day, a workmate I was cool with had a family emergency. He asked me to cover his shift, and though it was different from my usual, I thought I could handle one 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift. So I said yes. Working nights actually pays more, so I thought I'd give it a shot to earn some extra cash. I had a Thursday night shift with this younger guy, Benji. He was a security guard like me, and he would always talk about how his uncle helped him get this job. He's a good kid, but a bit too cocky for my liking. I attempted to get to know him more while we were at the desk, but discovered he had no idea about his uncle's job there. Kinda strange, but all right. Then late around 1 a.m., a lady ran into the building. Employees need to use their badges for entry after work hours. I didn't hear her swipe her card, and she was in jeans and a tee, which seemed odd, but she flashed me her work ID and said she had to pick something up from the 11th floor. I had her sign in, though she wasn't too keen on it and got a strange vibe from her. So I decided to go with her to the 11th floor. I told Benji I'll be back in a bit and got into the lift with her to head up. She said I could hang out in the corridor, but she looked pretty edgy. After she used her pass to get through some doors, I couldn't help but trail her. I'd never been to this section before, and the doors were pretty solid. I had a weird feeling something was off, so I stopped the door from closing and peeked inside. The room was packed with tanks. There were tanks as big as humans. Instead of water, they had this weird purple liquid in them. Meanwhile, I could hear a woman making a mess, probably knocking over some metal stuff. In a bit, before I could even check out what's inside those tanks, she bolted out holding something close. She spotted me and told me to head back to the lift. I heard some noise from the room, something like groaning, but couldn't figure out what was going down. We got into the lift and I asked her what she was holding, tried to grab it, but she fought me off and accidentally elbowed me in the nose. My nose was bleeding a lot and I couldn't see. When the elevator doors opened, she just bolted. I yelled at Benji to go after her, but he was just lounging at the desk. He tried to get up, but she had already disappeared. While I was cleaning up, I rang up our boss, who's always ready to take a call, and told him what went down. He turned to me and said, "Stay here." After about 15 minutes, a group of people who seemed like a SWAT team arrived, along with some familiar faces. These were people from work. They quickly went to the 11th floor while the SWAT team checked around. I had to tell them what I knew, but I never got to know what the woman had taken or what was in that room. I just sort of forgot to mention that peeking in there likely saved me. I got canned the next week. They said they let me go because they had too many guys on deck, but it was definitely about that night. I snooped around, tried figuring out more about the place, and traced it back to the U.S. government. But then, someone called and told me, "Quit poking around." That's all there is to it. No other reason. I took their advice. What was going on there was way too risky, even more than being in jail. Since then, I've shuffled around a bit and tried to stay under the radar. So I'm an insurance agent now. I'm not telling a lot about myself. Don't want people I know to find me. Just needed to share my story. It's a kind of heads up to warn people, you know? If you see something you're not supposed to, just keep it to yourself. I believe in a lot of stuff, you know. It's pretty normal living here in South Carolina. People here often talk about the boo hag and the chupacabra. But you know, believing in these superstitions can be kind of draining at times. You know, sooner or later you're going to start looking into bizarre stuff nature has to offer. I mean, I've not seen stuff like the boo hag or chupacabra, but I've seen some scary things. You see, I'd go for drives to let off steam when I was stressed out. I'd just choose a tree-lined road and drive for hours. I'd have my windows down and my music maxed out. I never thought I was bothering anyone. Now, I know better. I messed something up. I knew it was going to happen eventually, even if I didn't know when exactly. Sooner or later, my car was going to break down on some lonely road. It was bound to happen eventually, my tire hitting something sharp. Scared the hell out of me when the tire burst and the rim hit the gravel. Good thing I didn't jerk the steering wheel when I panicked. I managed to stop the car without any serious harm, even if it did mess up my usual peaceful routine. Once I calmed down, I got out of the car and saw the damage. The tire was completely shot. I busted my tire on something. I had a backup, but I'd never changed a tire before. I was set on doing it, though, even if I wasn't too quick. By the time I lifted my car and got the flat tire off, it was already too late. I felt like something was looking at me. I could hear it moving around in the shadows of the trees. I could even hear the sound of leaves and twigs breaking under it. But when I tried to see what it was, there was nothing. It was loud. I had no idea how it could be so quiet. I tried to see it. I shouted to try and get it to leave. Then I refocused on the tire. I was just about finishing up fixing the spare tire when this creepy thing came out from the trees. The car's headlights were kind of lighting up the area and reflecting off the thing's skin. It was shiny like scales. The light bouncing off it caught my eye. There was no way it was going to sneak up on me. Anyway, it wasn't necessary. It was right by the road, just a couple of steps from where I stopped. It was watching me while I was messing around with the tire iron. Then it sort of took a breath and stood straight. It kind of looked like a man when it stood up. Sure, its arms and fingers were a bit too long and it was all scaly, but from a distance you could mistake it for a person. If a car happened to pass by, which hardly ever happens, they might just think there were two people standing next to the car. Seriously, nobody would believe there's a monster here. It was so different from all the stories we heard as kids. I was still trying to wrap my head around it with the creature right there next to me. I rushed for the car door before it pounced, hopped into the driver's seat while it was charging at me. It scratched the car as I revved the engine and went on drive. As I sped off, the spare tire shouted and tossed dirt up in the air. The thing fell sideways as I took off. I checked it out in the rearview mirror and saw it getting back up on its feet. So I kept going. I screamed at the speedometer and stepped on the gas as hard as I could. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't speed up fast enough. Even though I pushed the old car to its limits, the creature was still quicker. I watched as it got closer and then vanished out of sight. I was definitely breathing super hard then. I wasn't driving straight anymore. I was zigzagging on the road, looking around for where that beast had gone. I still knew it was there. Then I heard a big crash on top. Something heavy hit the roof. I knew what it was straight away. This thing swings its hand and slaps a big web across my windshield. I watched as it tried to smash my glass with another heavy hit. I knew it would break in soon. I hit the brakes hard and just hoped for the best. The creature got tossed around, spinning off the front of my car and landing hard on the road. It flailed around and moaned as it rolled. You could see burns and scrapes on it already, which was a good sign. It wasn't invincible. Hopefully that would have slowed it down. I could almost taste freedom again, but the only way I could get out of this mess was to keep going. I revved up the car once more, charging at the thing lying ahead. I'd avoid it if I could. I heard a loud scream just before I would have hit it with my car. I saw a quick movement and then it disappeared. It jumped back into the forest, narrowly avoiding being run over by me. I just kept going, cranking up the tunes and telling myself I was okay. Once I made it back into town, though, a cop stopped me. He ended up taking me, a sobbing, trembling mess, to the hospital. In South Carolina, some cops went to look for the creature I ran into. They didn't find anything, but none of them said I was lying. My story was a bit out there, but they didn't think I was nuts. Plus, the blood on my car windshield wasn't from a person. We didn't really do much, just cleaned it with a hose and waited for about a month for the repairs. Then, everything went back to normal. Well, except for those curvy road drives.